Ladies and gentlemen, one of the best chess game of the year was just played. It's between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. This game was played at the Global Chess League. It is some of the best action that we get. An incredible game. A 20-minute game with 0-second bonus time. Magnus opens with e4 and Hikaru played the Sicilian defense. Magnus plays knight f3. Hikaru plays g6. A big decision. He is not playing d6, the main line with Knightdorf Sicilian. Magnus now for a second time in the Global Chess League plays d4. And Hikaru takes the pawn on d4. And Magnus takes back with the knight. Hikaru goes bishop g7 and Magnus plays c4. Now we have this Morixi bind, after knight c6 bishop e3. Hikaru plays queen b6. Magnus goes forward, plays knight to b5, blocking the queen from hitting b2, threatening the queen, but also bishop b2 is slightly problematic. Hikaru plays queen a5 check and that knight on b5 drops back to c3. And black plays another queen move. Magnus plays queen c1. That move is fine, but I think queen c2 or queen d2 is slightly preferred by the computer, but queen c1. Obviously nothing wrong with it. Hikaru plays d6. Magnus blocks the diagonal and plays knight d2. Hikaru plays bishop e6. Bishop e2. Bishop d4. What? The funniest part is this is the best move, which is so absurd. The fact that black has this bishop hidden behind the pawns and it's supposed to be protector of the dark squares. No, he actually has to act now, because the thing is, if Hikaru plays knight f6, Magnus castles and white actually gets a very quick pawn attack going and black doesn't have a lot of easy play. So Hikaru plays bishop d4 and bishop takes. Bishop d4 confuses Magnus to such an extent that he spends 5 out of his 16 minutes to take the bishop. Hikaru takes the bishop with his knight and Magnus moves the bishop out of the way. Hikaru goes rook c8 and Magnus is ready to castle, which he does, and Hikaru's knight comes out to f6. Rook e1 and Hikaru plays shocking knight g4 to put the knight on e5 and also hitting this 2 pawns at the same time. The position is super weird. Magnus kicks out the knight. Says, I don't understand what you are doing, Hikaru. Why would you put your knight on e5? The thing is, knight on e5 is just going to be a target for any future attack. The knight should probably stayed on f6. The bishop goes back to f1 and black castles. Now both boys has 10 minutes on the clock and Magnus plays a3 and queen goes back. Now Magnus plays knight to d5 and Hikaru plays bishop d5. ed5 and Hikaru tries to fight back with this move e6. Knight e4 hitting d6, pawn going to f6. Hikaru goes all in and plays f5. Defends against knight f6 and all his pawns are so far forward in. The king's is too weak and Magnus here unlocks a beauty, just an absolute kisser straight through the guard right in the mouth, c5. That is not what Hikaru is expecting because it weakens the knight on e5. We now gets dc5. Magnus plays knight g5 and threaten the knight and the pawn behind it begins to hang. Hikaru is under pressure here, he centralizes the queen to play defense and here comes queen e3. Knight goes back to f7 and Magnus arrives on the e6 square and takes back the pawn. Hikaru rook e8, pins the knight to the queen. Magnus puts the bishop on c4. If Hikaru goes knight c2 here, queen c3 and queen g7 is game over. Black does not have any easy move here, but Hikaru plays the best move. Knight to d8 targeting the knight. Magnus goes rook d1 centralizing the rook. Hikaru get rid of that knight, but now the pawn is there and Hikaru stops the pawn from moving by rook e7, but Magnus finds the best move to turn the screw. b4. Trying to remove the defense of the knight. Hikaru's next move very easy, b6 and Magnus trades to isolate that pawn. h4 from Magnus and he is like, I want to go h5 and wants to open up the black king. Hikaru here spending some time finding the best move, counter-attacking with his f-pawn, making the queen go somewhere. Magnus maintains central position by queen e4. Hikaru king e7. Rook b1 a nice move and Hikaru plays knight f5. Magnus goes rook d1 and Hikaru puts the knight back to d4 and Magnus goes h5. Now the move that Hikaru plays here is so absurd, the best move. Do you know the best move here? Pause the video. And if you finds it, comment it down below. The best move is to courageously walk your king to f6. King f6, getting closer to the pawn. And Magnus counterplay rook back to e1. And now Hikaru plays rook e8, lining up every single piece that he has against the pawn on e6. Magnus brings the other rook to the center of the board, not allowing the knight to move. And I can't believe the move that Hikaru plays here. A crazy move. Hikaru takes the pawn on h5. His king is now completely open. He has 4-pawn island and doubled h-pawns, and suddenly who is attacking who? Magnus plays rook d3, Hikaru rook g8. Rook h3 and Hikaru plays the best move rook g5 defending everything, and Magnus plays rook h4. The threat is rook takes f4 or queen takes f4. Hikaru counter with f3. Magnus plays rook to f4 check. King goes back to g7. g3. Now Magnus is winning, but Hikaru is not done. He say h4. Here if you take with the rook, Hikaru can sack his rook and brings his queen in. And Magnus missed the best move here, which is bishop d3, and plays rook takes h4. And Hikaru plays rook takes g3. Magnus moves his king to h1. Again if you takes the rook with f takes g3 and queen comes in. Now Hikaru goes back to g6. Magnus brings his rook from the e-file to g-file. And now ladies and gentlemen, the best move played by Hikaru. The rook sacrifice. Rook takes e6. Rook takes e6 is a spectacular defensive countershot. Why is this a brilliant move, you ask? If bishop takes the rook, you lose the defense of e2. Rook takes rook, king takes rook, and knight e2 check, and it's made in a couple of moves. So rook takes e6 is a spectacular move. But Magnus doesn't blunder and takes the rook on g6 with check. Hikaru takes back. Now queen b7 check. King f6. Queen f7, which is not a good move. Hikaru is now winning. King g5 going after the rook. Magnus plays queen takes h7 and Hikaru plays knight f5. Hikaru could have played a devastating move rook h6, forcing all the pieces off the board, which results in win for black. Magnus plays rook h5. King f4. Bishop f1. Magnus playing defense. Hikaru plays rook g5. Both trades off the rooks. Magnus takes the a7 pawn and Hikaru centralizing the queen. In this position king g1 was played. And Hikaru shuffled back and forth, and the player breathed a sigh of relief and a draw. That was chaos, a high-level Sicilian battle. Stay tuned and I appreciate your support. Thank you. Follow us for more such content. See you next time.